Hey everyone, welcome to the show. You're joined by me, your host, Max Pears. But not only that, I have a fantastic and energetic guest who's here to spice up your life and the podcast. It's none other than Lauryn Ash. Thank you for joining me, mate.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. We've been trying to get this arranged now for a while.
Yeah, but I mean, life happens, but we're here now, so that's what matters.
That's it. Time difference doesn't help either, but we did it. We managed it for all of you amazing listeners. So get excited for that. So before we kick into this, do you want to give a bit of a brief backstory onto yourself, mate, and how you got into this industry?
Yeah, so like you said, right, my name's Lauryn Ash. I got started into this industry a very strange way. I was actually in startups and app development, and then I was also a creative writer. And so I ended up writing a lot on the side for prose, poetry. I did actually bits of travel writing because I used to travel a lot. And so when I studied abroad at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, I ended up coming across this business competition that was all about how do we change the way we read. I didn't even know this was a problem. I thought I read just fine. So I kind of signed up trying to figure out what this was about. And it turned out that in doing so, the fact that I played a lot of video games was really interesting to all of these biz dev people, because they were like, what is a game? What is a story? And how does that relate to each other? And at the time, I didn't even know I wanted to go into games. I thought I'd go into business, right? And then I would do screenwriting. And so I'd be doing something with dialogue, something with maybe light novels, which are shorter like books. And so I got in contact with our business college. And basically, after describing what I wanted to do with my life and change stories and put readers in the experience of the story, my business professor basically looked at me and said, so my husband used to work at EA. You should go to this gaming convention. I was like, what? There are conventions for people that like games? Because I'm at a literary school, so I'm like in books and literature. And then lo and behold, I got to meet some amazing people that just made indie games on the side. And so then I got into games. I used my writing and kind of narrative to help me out through there. I realized I had no technical skill, or at least not what I wanted to do. And I didn't have any design, quote unquote, right, design formal experience. So I got my master's of interactive technology at SMU Guild Hall, which I loved because it was like you're going to the guild hall to eat and congregate and make games. So it was super nerdy for me. And also my degree is an MIT degree. So it was another nerdy pun on my resume. So I was doubly excited to attend, and I mastered in level design. And in that, it was all because level design is about that holistic experience of the player. And so now I do more systems and more game design, which is kind of even more about the player experience and less about the world design. But that's kind of how I got where I am today.
That's awesome, mate. Like you said, it's a very, very different path, and that's incredible. I'm not gonna lie, when you mentioned the hall part, I was imagining a Harry Potter-esque kind of hall with everyone sitting down, but instead of, owls, it would just be, I don't know, some sort of cyber owl instead.
Yes, it felt really, yeah, and I have a really big laugh, and so when I was like, it's such a small hall area and it has the different classrooms that if I laughed on one end, on the second floor, in the corner of the building, the lower floor with the kitchen, they could all hear me. It was just echoed through. So
making tons of friends then, I take it.
Oh yeah, I actually made, I think, more friends with the cohorts above and below me than my cohort, which was your classmates. Yeah. Just because everyone was like, who is this person? Versus my classmates were like, shut up, Lauryn. We're learning here.
Keep it down.
Keep it down. I was like, no, I'm just having a good time.
Yeah. But before we go on, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by none other than GameDev.tv. For those of you who don't know, they are a phenomenal resource which helps you who may not have any experience to those looking to grow and improve their experience and knowledge on game dev related tools, whether that be programming, design, or art. All of these you can find on their website. And not only are they a great resource, but they've teamed up with myself to give you a phenomenal discount. If you go on and follow through the links that I've got down below, which give you a range of courses, you'll find that there is amazing discounts of over 80%. Normally a course costs around about £200, but luckily with the codes that we've got, and should I say the links down below, you'll get them for what would be about 40 to 50 bucks, around that benchmark. So if you're looking to go for it, this is a great place to start your learning. I personally am going through the Unity Beginners 3D C# course myself, and I'm really enjoying it with great tutors like Rick and Sam, which have previously been on this podcast as well. So if you're looking to improve your skills, head no further than GameDev.tv. All of the links to the great courses will be down in the description below. Now back to the episode. For other students who are looking into understanding a bit more, can you explain a bit more of what is game design?
Yeah.
It's a broad topic.
Yep. I love this question because depending on what type of game you're making, right, it makes you a different game designer. So for example, if you're making a platformer, you're going to be really focused as a game designer on movement or traversal, right? You really want to hone in on the platforming mechanics. Or maybe you want to write spin or innovate it on it. So you have more puzzle design in there. But you would be considered a game designer because if you're doing that whole holistic experience, you wouldn't be called a puzzle designer unless that you were only doing the puzzles, right? So for larger AAA titles, a game designer is someone who combines their systems knowledge with their with something. It could be with something else. What I've found is game designers tend to do, say, narrative and systems, or it could also be levels and systems, or it could just be experience and holistic vision and direction for the game.
It's so interesting because you use the word systems there, and that's something that I think people don't necessarily realize that they're seeing in play. You know, when I think about systems, some of the best systems in terms of how they all gel together has to be the GTA franchise, and how that's gotten so much better, so much more into what makes their worlds feel so alive. I watched a video on YouTube of like the player was just stood there, and then I don't know why, but he got hit by an NPC, and then someone called the police on them. The police showed up, and I said, that's just all systems there. And
yes,
it's insane.
No, I think the best systems in a game are the ones you don't even know exist. Right? I mean, to me, when you look at systems design, so many people tend to focus on the creation of the system or the technical design of it. How is it efficient and helping my other developers, right, work better, work faster? Or how is the system really great for the player? Is it easy to navigate? Can they interact with it? How do we show it? How do we, allow players to maybe like use that system to their advantage, such as like a farming simulator or right crafting in Skyrim? How do those systems right interact with the player? But most people don't think about the systems that players never see, like you were talking about right in the GTA example. How those systems interact with the player, or how the player is completely unaware right of what's happening, and how that changes in different effects.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And just the amount of, not only as you're saying there, but like how the systems interact with one another as well, because that's a huge impact. And I'm sure you know yourself, there's normally a lot of game designers on sometimes one particular system because of how broad
yes
that scope can cover.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that for a lot of these titles, you'll have someone that's just dedicated to gear, for example. So that's the only system that person is in charge of. And if that is true, then what you'll find is that those right properties, especially like Destiny 2 isn't a great example because they have the the loadout, and they have a lot of different weapons, and it's all about getting those weapons and figuring out what the best weapon you want is. There's that chase. And so for them, the game designer is focused specifically on making gear, the system work, right? That your gear actually increases your light level, and your weapons designer, the weapons designer is the one that is in charge of, right, making sure that the weapons themselves are really strong and powerful, but also that, right, your gear is increasing and also making that really powerful as well. But on the flip side, that systems designer is probably also in charge of or working with someone who makes sure that those items are even worth chasing. Because if the item itself isn't functional and doesn't work, that's one thing. But then if the item isn't even exciting, right, that's where game design comes in. So it's not just about making it functional, it's about making it fun.
I was going to ask with this, like, how do you find that balance? What is it? And like you said, each game and each system brings its own challenge. But is there anything that helps you kind of focus in on that?
So on current and past projects, I've always been in charge of a lot because I'm really great at seeing the connection points between different and seemingly unrelated systems. And so that includes, right, setting up, say, chests in a level, right, or to setting up collectibles are totally different, right? A chest would have gear, and collectibles has a totally different user experience. But I completely connected them in my latest, in my latest studio, because I understood that when you change the space from a single player experience, which encourages exploration, to a multiplayer experience, which necessarily doesn't, there might be collectibles that you wouldn't be able to go back and revisit. And so you would have to put them into the multiplayer space. And so I basically was like, we're going to have to somehow figure out how these chests that do not have this motivation, to give them that motivation. So, all right. So I guess to answer your question, for me, it's really important as a game designer to kind of figure out how seemingly unrelated systems actually connect. And so for me, game design is all about looking at things that you've done and going, not just how you can make that, say, one mechanic better, like jump, but how could jump actually relate to something like exploration? How can jump relate to combat? That's a really fun one because everyone is pretty familiar with Mario, and obviously jump is the combat mechanic in that game. That is how you overcome obstacles, but then that's also how you, right, get power-ups, you get rewarded. And, you know, back in the day, it could have been very easy for someone to look at that and go, you're not going to jump on a guy, like that's not going to kill him. Right?
I don't want to know how they figured out that it did. I don't want to be in that test room.
No, yeah, exactly, right? Like, to someone, it could have been really off the wall, right? So it's about finding that seemingly off the wall thing and trying to figure out how it connects to something larger. And for me, it's all about really looking at that. Something that you see in Assassin's Creed, for example, is the hidden blade mechanic. We all kind of know about the mechanic. And I believe it was an Odyssey where you actually didn't have it.
Oh, okay.
Right? I believe it was in that game. Yeah.
I haven't played the latest two. Valhalla is where I'm kind of going to jump back into the franchise.
I'm so excited for you to jump back into Valhalla. I'm a huge Assassin's Creed fan myself. I have never actually worked at Ubisoft, so everything I say is completely supposition based off playing and analyzing their games. But when you look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey versus, is it Odyssey? No. It's Origins. It's the one in Egypt.
Origins, the one in Egypt. Yep.
It's Origins, the one in Egypt. So when you look at Assassin's Creed Origins, you're going to see that they took their main mechanic out of the entire game, and then they gave it to you basically at the end. And at the end, it's kind of weak. It's not great, but it doesn't do like one-hit kills, but it is something that is a seemingly unrelated system, you could say, to the franchise, because it's not just about being an assassin for some players. It's also about going in and visiting new places, especially these ancient historical places. And so when you look at it that way, it completely makes sense for them to get rid of the hidden blade mechanic. But as we see from Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I mean, fans are just dying for the hidden blade mechanic to come back as it was in the original Assassin's Creed. And it is because something that seemed to just be a tool or just a weapon was actually completely integral to the idea of being an assassin. It's that one-hit kill. It's that quick get in, get out methodology, and that player experience that was a hallmark of the Assassin's Creed genres. And so putting in other systems like control points where you have to take over a base, and I think the ones where like there's a target, so you have to run and you have to catch them through crowds. But like any of those other systems, when you don't have the hidden blade, are now immediately more complex. You have to do a lot of other things to complete your objective. But when you do have the hidden blade, now it is more about your stealth and your thievery skills and those type of roguelike activities that you could say are more indicative of an assassin.
I was going to say, because it's so fascinating you mentioned that. Like I said, I've taken a break from the ACs. The last one I played was Syndicate.
Oh, Syndicate was good.
I was just a massive fan. I've got way too many collector's editions of Assassin's Creed in my dad's attic right now. I think he would kind of be more annoyed if I kept piling them up. But it was it Revelations? It was the final game where you played as Ezio, where he's the old Ezio, and how they turned the hidden blade into the hook blade, and how that played more into the traversal, kind of, you know, what you were saying, because parkour is such a pillar to that franchise in terms of design. And just I remember that just being just curving the blade, and how, like you said, the systems that came from that really changed your combat, your movement, from sliding down ropes. Instead of killing enemies, you could hook under their legs and, you know, stun them to get away. So yeah, no, it's a very, very good example with that one, mate.
Yeah, I actually am so glad you brought up Assassin's Creed Revelations, because for me, whenever I've studied Assassin's Creed, I've always looked at how they've kind of the stories that have had to change in that universe based on the mechanics that they've afforded you. And Revelations was all about increasing their traversal and having that kind of celebration of the parkour. And the hook blade is a huge example of that. But then you look at Black Flag that comes, you look at Assassin's Creed 3 that comes after it, and doesn't really have those same traversal mechanics. But I like skipping to Assassin's Creed Black Flag because it is a true departure from the Assassin's Creed storytelling that we got in the Ezio trilogy, I guess. Right? And it also showed different types of mechanics design driven from these huge systems, you could say systems design changes, right? Instead of, naval warfare was in 3, but it was really refined in Assassin's Creed 4. And naval warfare is a system, it's not a mechanic. Something that you really loved about Assassin's Creed Revelations was that it changed a unique mechanic, the hidden blade, into something that gave it more functionality, right? That's a true hallmark of really great game design. Nothing against naval warfare and being a pirate. I loved Black Flag. It was great. I actually even loved
You've heard it here first. Lauren hates pirates.
I love pirates.
Breaking story.
No, it's great. Pirates are great. I actually, you know what? I even love the first person bits. of that game.
I can't even remember. Oh yeah, there was that.
Yeah, I had all the computers.
So
I really loved those. But you see that the story had to completely change because 4 was such a departure from you could call it the Assassin's Creed formula. And I'm not saying it was a bad choice for them to start departing from that and introducing more of the Far Cry systems, if you will, into those areas. But it definitely was just a departure, right, from what was important. And so Valhalla feels like it's going back to its roots because it is a return to what mechanics are going to drive the player into the systems versus how do the systems change the way the player plays.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's like I said, it's going to be the one that I return to from my hiatus of the franchise, and I'm very excited to see again what they've learned from Origins and Odyssey, because I heard they were a massive departure, as you just mentioned there, about not even having the hidden blade.
Yeah,
already. So
Odyssey, the one in Greece, that's the first Assassin's Creed I have never finished.
Oh wow!
So I loved it. I even loved the dialogue choice. But but it's such a massive game that
Yeah.
I couldn't finish it now being in game design. Like now being in games, it was just too much.
It's amazing how big games have gotten, and it is mind-blowing in so many ways, and at the same time it's also a thing that I don't want to use the word like puts you off, but it's time consuming. Maybe that's the best way, and not necessarily in a negative way. Just that you're going to be sinking a lot of time into these games. And yeah, no, I completely understand, because I'm the same. Sometimes I crave more of that's why I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII in a sense, because it was a much more linear experience that I knew wasn't going to be a huge one in a way.
Yeah, and at the time for me playing Final Fantasy VII, I absolutely wanted to play it immediately and couldn't even find the time just to play it like all in one sitting, like I'd like to. So even smaller experiences like that, like I'm having trouble trying to find the time to play.
Yeah, no, I understand you. My friends are giving me sticks. I still haven't finished Last of Us Part 2. Again, it's just finding the time for it to sink my teeth into it, So no, I wanted to ask your thoughts on this, because I know we've got another topic to tackle, and I really wanted to get your opinion on this, because you mentioned both Mario and Assassin's Creed, and we just talked about Final Fantasy VII there. And the one thing that I'll definitely say about Mario and Final Fantasy is, especially with their systems, they leave certain elements hidden. Whether that be the backflip in Mario or the dash jump that some players may never do because they don't experiment, or the combination of material and how that can have like really big benefits for combining the right ones. And I just wanted to get your opinions on like, what are your thoughts on like not necessarily hiding systems, but not explaining every system? Is that something that you personally like?
I really like that. As a player, I will say that I love systems that are discovered over time. For me, I know this is a totally different topic than from the games that we've brought up, so I apologize, I guess, in that one, only because I'm referencing another game. But I will say that for me, I absolutely love the hidden systems that you can find in BioWare's latest, like Dragon Age Inquisition. There's a huge crafting system that's actually underground, like a main, like in Skyhold. Sorry if there's spoilers out there, but yeah, there's this whole underground crafting area, and if you never complete those quests, or you could completely miss the door, just never actually learn how to craft and upgrade your gear. You also never learn how to change its cosmetic values. You could really never engage in crafting to, say, beat the game or to complete the story. And it seems like a huge system, crafting, right? Upgrading, choosing and creating new weapons. But it's something that they don't really explain to you, right, until you get there. Rather than having an objective that's like, go find the workbench. Here is the workbench. And they actually have a moment like that even earlier in the game as well, in Haven, where there's this blacksmith that's like, this would be really beneficial for you to do. And it is a quest and an objective and all of that. But it's something that the player chooses and opts into. And in quest design, which is, I guess, the heart of this example, is that you can choose to take a quest or not take a quest. And so that's their opt-in factor, which is why I tend to use Dragon Age as an example, is because it's really easy for people that are just trying to get into game design to understand. They can say, I didn't accept that quest, so I didn't get it. The system was hidden. But the fact that there is even this barrier for the player to have to overcome, in scare quotes there, is what makes it a hidden system. You don't need to do it. You can just chase after more gear. You can chase after more items. But then you discover that you can become incredibly overpowered by completely crafting new items. In this system, there's another hidden factor, which is that each class, right, mage, rogue, and like warrior, they all wear different types of clothes, right? Which means they can only have certain materials. I don't know if you've played Dragon Age Inquisition, but the community quickly found out that if you use certain materials, those actually can then make a blueprint for, say, a rogue armor to be worn by a mage, which means that the mage can wear rogue armor, right? The mage could also wear like plate mail, for example. That was not tutorialized, but that is a huge hidden feature that it completely min-maxes your entire arsenal. And as soon as I figured it out, and also went online to kind of figure out which materials can actually be used for it, you only see hints in the game. And so it's something like that that just immediately increases that depth and complexity in something as complicated, as a crafting system. And it's those little details, that I love seeing in games, because that's where you really get into the heart of, that extra level of dedication and design.
Yeah, no, that's such a good example. I didn't finish Dragon Age Inquisition, so I didn't even know about that. That's insane to me.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, everyone looks at like the surface of a game, but like you're saying, with a lot of the materia from Final Fantasy and how you've got to create those different combinations, and that's what's actually going to create something really unique, like the elemental materia with the fire, with your fire materia, to get your fire damage on your attacks. That's something that's simple, but then you can even do more and more linked materia. So now fire damage actually gives you some more health back, or like if you take poison, that's actually something that helps regenerate, right? And so I think that it's all of those different ways we combine them. But please, I'd love to hear what you had to say.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
No, I was going to say I guess one of the most recent examples of player exploration really has to go to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Like, the fact that they just give you everything right off the bat, and then go figure it out. And then you, like saying, you've got all these going on to armors, different ones have different effects on different enemies, and how you can use that to maneuver your surroundings. And I'm not gonna lie, every time I watch someone else play, I was like, God, they tackled this so geniusly. Why am I such an idiot running in here like a barbarian with my sword?
No, absolutely, yeah.
You're better.
No, I think, I think that it makes people be clever, right? Like anything that you go, wow, like that's so different, that's so innovative. I mean, I didn't discover, I actually discovered cooking quite early, but I didn't discover that you could make real recipes, like real food, until much later in the game. And I just think it's because I was really bad at cooking. Just not a real world equivalent here. I'm actually okay. I'm a decent cook. But I mean, in Breath of the Wild,
you downplayed your reality. I'm all right.
Oh, I'm all right. I'm not I don't know. I mean, my Link was bad. But then you go online and then you get better, right? But that's something for me that was really hidden. I just thought you had to eat the apples, you just ate things. You picked up off the ground in regular games, and then suddenly it was oh wait, I can cook them. Oh, that's not a good recipe.
Yeah, that's it. You learn quickly. You're oh, I'm glad I'm not eating that.
Yeah,
Sorry, Link.
No, but you're but you're right. It's about making the player feel really clever, right? Or really dumb, but then they want to learn, right, from their mistakes. I immediately needed to become a better chef. Link, chef extraordinaire.
That's it. Sorry, Gannon, I've got a new 5-star restaurant to open.
Sorry, Gannon. Can this wait?
Yeah. Yes, I hear you, Zelda. Geez, I'm in the middle of something, But it's like they never explained the shield surfing, which to me is one of the funnest mechanics there is. But they never tell you how to do it. You have to fiddle with your controls to be able to do it.
And it's funny. I think that I was going to say yes. I think that's exactly one of the things that you have to look at when we look at these games that are so critically acclaimed. It's critically acclaimed for a reason, and I really believe that it's because it allows players to express themselves in this unique world, to figure out and identify how different systems and mechanics work together.
Yeah. No, there's always that great quote. I can't remember whoever said it, so I apologize for stealing it. It is like, everyone wants to learn, but no one wants to be taught. And I think that kind of really plays into it as well. Is like when you figure it out by yourself, you feel, like you're Albert Einstein. You're like, yes, I'm the genius here. And it, like I say, to bring it back into the world building, it just brings you in.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, so this is how the world operates.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's my favorite part of going back to Assassin's Creed and Assassin's Creed 2, is that Ezio was the rebel. He didn't want to know how the world worked, right? He is the ultimate epitome of, all right, teach me everything you know to be an assassin, but I'm not actually going to listen to you. I'm going to do my own thing. And that super mirrored exactly what the player is like, right? Oh, yeah, okay, fine, give me a tutorial, but I'm going to run there.
Skip. Yeah.
I'm going to do everything my way. And sometimes I would get Ezio into trouble, right, in the story. But sometimes I get the player into trouble. Suddenly the entire town is after them, and they've got to figure out how to escape. Or even into I believe I don't know if it was in 2 or if it was in Brotherhood, where you actually got to build out your town, and you actually got to change it. But actually also then increased it was in Brotherhood. You also got to increase your traversal options as well in that space, right? It kind of gave you more control about truly changing that world. And so that's always a really fun one to think about, as yes, it was a linear, say, story. That's kind of how we remember the game. But remember also that there were a ton of systems and mechanics that actually changed and allowed the player to experiment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it just shows to anyone who's aspiring to be a game designer, really pay attention to the worlds that you're occupying and that. And I will say, I do not envy you from level design v game design. Sometimes the amount of Excel sheets you have to do to calculate the numbers. We use Destiny as an earlier example to improve your light numbers to be part of their core pillars, which is the grind. And I'm just like, wow, to keep track of all that.
No,
insane.
Yeah, it's insane. And I think that there's only so much you can do, though, in a spreadsheet as well. You also have to go back into the world and experience it for yourself, because a spreadsheet is going to tell you something called math. And math is great, right? But at the end of the day, math is...
I love it. You said that so broken. Math is great.
Yeah. I mean, but it's true. It's okay. Yeah. It's great. I mean, it was never my favorite subject in school. And if you had told me I could make games with it, I would have called you a liar. And then here I am, an English lit major, basically just doing math for a living.
Dreams really do come true.
Dreams really do come true. I can finally make games. No, but you have to get out of the spreadsheet and you have to play it and you have to see what it feel like. And you brought this up with the Destiny light levels, but then what does playing Destiny feel like? And no one's going to tell you, oh, it feels so good to have the math work out. All right. But they'll say things like, oh, it just feels amazing to use this weapon. Oh, I love that I can chain these attacks together and then let off one final blow. And you can do that because the math works well. And also because the systems and the mechanics, right, of all of those pieces can come together nicely.
Yeah, no, I think, without systems, games, it's just such an important part of games. There's no two ways about it. And creating engaging systems, I mean, that is the real challenge at the end of the day. But like you're saying, like as a game designer and a level designer talking, it's how for us we work together to take those systems and those ideas and provide a playable and enjoyable space to really maximize and facilitate those systems. I think that's always the magic dust, if you will.
Yeah, that's definitely the magic dust. Because I mean, you can have an amazing system, but you're absolutely right. If we didn't provide you a playable and enjoyable space to use it, well, then suddenly you've gotten about a bunch of toys, but you've got nowhere to use them.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we've actually spent more time on this than I thought we would, mate, because we had a proper discussion point we planned before this.
We did, but we'll go directly into it. I mean, it'll be good.
Smooth segue in. So this is one because you've recently, or your latest article of the time of us recording is your article called How to Recognize Ludonarrative Harmony.
Yes.
And this is something that I've spoken with my friends about before, and how it really is important to have this as we talk about systems. We didn't necessarily talk about narrative, but you mentioned it briefly there and how really they combine. So do you want to explain to the public, to the listeners, what ludonarrative is, mate?
So for anybody that's trying to get into game design, and you're really excited about this, ludonarrative harmony is when the gameplay and the story really work together to create this memorable and immersive moment. Ludonarrative, particularly, is the narrative of the game, right? Ludo being game, narrative being, you could say, story. For me, I like to define narrative as not just the linear story you're playing from point A to, say, point B, but I also define narrative as the internal monologue you're telling yourself for why you're playing this game, your motivation, and also the context that the game provides you with your actions. It's easy when you think of a cliff in between you and there's a chasm and you have to jump over it. Internally, you're motivated to jump over it, maybe because you see something. Maybe you just want to jump over it because you get an achievement. But also, so that's a narrative. But the story could also be on the other side. Hey, come over here, Lauren. We're your friends. All you have to do is jump over this chasm. Well, then I'll jump over, right, for my friends. And that's in a multiplayer space, right, if they're real friends or AI companions.
Yeah, I think that's, do you know what? Like, I think that's a great example of how to connect it. Because I think one of the best ones to me, especially as we spoke earlier about tutorials and people and how they learn, one of the ones that like I really enjoyed was Shadow of Mordor, where they first teach you stealth because you're trying to surprise your character's wife. And it was a really nice kind of moment because not only are you learning the mechanics, you're keeping stealth not because you're a badass yet, but you're trying to have a joke with your wife. And it also builds on that relationship because you're learning how these two interact with one another, that they have a sense of humor with each other. And I thought that was, like, to me, a very well done introduction of character AI, because we've all seen it to a point where there's some games that try to cram in like 10 years of backstory in like 10 minutes. Hey, buddy, old pal, remember that time when we were 10? And he's like, no.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that 100%. For me, my favorite tutorial from a big game that I think a lot of people have played, and if you haven't, should, is the Horizon Zero Dawn tutorial moments, where you don't have the user interface, you don't have the HUD, and they're teaching you mechanics. And then you fall into a cave and suddenly you get this device that completely changes your screen. Suddenly you have access to all of this information you previously never had access to before. And that's the story of Horizon Zero Dawn in a nutshell. You're being presented with all of these facts of the world and how things have been, and then suddenly something enters your life and you realize that's not the way it has to be. And so now, as a child, you're already starting that journey as Aloy, and then she grows into a beautiful woman and then suddenly realizes, okay, I have to do this all over again. And so that introductory section, just like in Shadow of Mordor, is foreshadowing what the entire game is going to be about.
Yeah, no, and I think this is something like ludonarrative harmony is something that is one of the hardest things as an industry for us all to get right. I definitely see it as one of the biggest challenges. The easiest example is, if you're in an open world game and there's a mission which is like, okay, they've captured your partner, and if you don't get here soon, we're gonna kill them. And then the player can go off and still do the open world activities, right?
Yeah, and I'm playing this title called Greedfall right now, and I picked it up on a whim because my friend was playing it, and I really respect them as a narrative designer and a writer, and we're just having so much fun with it. And I was like, okay, I'll just try it. I paid full price, even though it was actually on sale on Steam, because I missed the sale. And I was like committed already. I was like, nope, paying it. And I played it, and it was the best purchase of COVID I think I've made because of how well, and in some instances how, I don't want to say poorly, but how off the mark sometimes they get with their ludonarrative harmony and mood. And I think it's because there are these moments where you don't have to become friends with your friends, right, in games. And I say this as jokingly, like from Overwatch, like if you're in a PvP match, you don't have to play with your friends, you can play against them. But in games like Dragon Age or in games like Greedfall, companions can just be meat shields, right? And I want to put it bluntly because, there are a lot of players out there that, they play these experiences, they have these companions, and they don't invest in them. But Greedfall did something amazing where if you invest in a companion, the story, the main story of the game, can completely change.
Oh, wow.
And I think that, and so no spoilers, right? Because I don't want to give it away because it was just absolutely incredible. But you could invest 10% into your companion. And if you invest that 10% into their storyline, that's not enough. You really have to show this companion that you trust them, that you want them around by completing their companion quests. If you don't do that, then apparently, the companion can't trust you. And, without giving anything away, that obviously in the real world, if your friends don't trust you, they really don't become your friends anymore. That's just true. And Greedfall did an amazing job of doing that, not just with this one particular companion, but did it really with all of them. The way that you respond to them in dialogue can also change their reputation or their feelings towards you. I will say that on that note, something that I struggle with as a game designer is comparing and contrasting, say, dialogue, because it's very easy to see what's written on screen. I struggle with, do you give any players indication of what a dialogue option is going to do before they choose it? Or to increase immersion, do you not give them anything and then have them, say, suffer the consequences of something they believed would actually be a good response?
That's a real tough one because, this is just from a player perspective rather than a game dev perspective. One of the things that I always find challenging with the dialogue options is 9 times out of 10, the selections you have do not translate word for word when the character says it.
Yeah.
And that has caught me off guard sometimes, where I was like, oh, this seems like a reasonable answer. And next thing they're like, and your mother's hideous. And I was like, whoa. That wasn't on the option here. And
no, exactly. Yeah. You're playing these games, and something I loved about Inquisition's dialogue wheel was that it kind of was sad, angry,
yes,
pleased, right? And I think that even though the dialogue didn't match, say, word to word, at least you kind of knew the general feeling. In Greedfall, they don't have that. They just have the basic 3 lines, and you're not really quite sure if it's good or not. But also because it's completely organic conversation. It's what would your character actually say. And if your character would say to someone's mother passing away, if your character would say, "It's all right, you'll get over it," you can read that line and hopefully would see that may not be the correct dialogue option for you to choose in that scenario. But maybe that's the character you want to play. Otherwise, there are some. But as a game designer, there are some really weird things where I see the game experience really marking high for ludonarrative harmony. I'm immersed and I'm not sure what to say. And all three words, like options, they're complete sentences, by the way. All three options sound good. I mean, they sound like what I want. And I end up choosing one, and it, it doesn't sound like it would be the best. I'm reading them, but I just want to get in on with the story. I choose it, and it ended up being the worst thing to say, apparently, because the character just doesn't like it, or they took it out of context, and I just completely didn't understand as a player. And so suddenly I'm going, man, that was a great game design decision to make. But oh shit, I am going to reload my save, and I'm going to do this conversation over again. I am, because as a player, like, I don't stand for that. But I'm kind of, those are the ones that perplex me. Now I'm going, okay.
Yeah.
I loved that as a game experience as a designer, but I hated it as a player. And that's where, when you brought up how creating that enjoyable space for players to play, that's also the hugest part of increasing ludonarrative harmony, is that sometimes something that creates more immersion might not necessarily be the right idea or the right example.
Yeah, it's a tough one to do, and like, I think the fact that we talked about systems is a really good one on building onto to this topic, because especially when you get to AAA games, which now, as we mentioned earlier, only seem to be getting bigger and bigger, to think not only about like how the systems interact with each other, interact with the player, interact then with the story. It is a real challenge to keep your eye on track of all of this and try and make sure that it keeps the player invested. And yeah, I only bring that up just because I think it's, like I said, it's an issue as an industry. I think we're still learning about, but also, like, as I said, as everything increases size and scale, it's like, whoa, who keeps an eye on that?
No, exactly. I mean, so this is something I love that you brought up this in the industry standpoint, because this is something I'm fighting for almost on a daily basis. It feels like it's not truly daily, at least I hope not. But explain, but something I'm fighting for is to get this in the industry's mind, to know that there are people out there that can see these connections between story and systems, that can truly see narrative systems, or rather the systems of narrative, right? And then also the narrative of systems. And it's really qualitative feedback. It's really all about the feeling of that space. And as an industry, we've come from a legacy of games where it's story, cutscene, combat, right?
Yeah.
Story, cutscene, combat.
Yeah.
Or story through combat. So Bloodborne, right, is a great example of that, because the story of how you go through the entire world, how you overcome the bosses, how you gain, and even death is all of that narrative. And so that's an incredible experience, but it's still now this story of systems. But then we look at the systems of story, we still go to these linear experiences where the story is incredible and the systems all go towards it, but can still completely fall through because it was still like the systems and the combat, or the story and the narrative and this emotional scene that then segued, right, with, you had to kill, say, 50 enemies to get to somebody crying over someone else dying. And that's the dissonance.
For sure. And because I'm going to have to rush you out the door here, because the time difference between you and I, with me and my Betty buys, is getting ever closer. But I loved that example because I want to give like two examples of my personal favorite.
Please do, yes.
Which blew me away. So the first one, it has to be Aerith's death. Like, you cannot give a better example of like the player investing into a character and then the loss of said character, not only from a narrative point of view, but from a gameplay. Because I said, if you've invested into Aerith, financially, with Gil, with your materia, with your XP, then the shock of losing her is felt in your team.
Yes.
And that to me, and still to this day, I don't want to use the word shocked because there are so many smart people in our industry, some that I've never even still met to this day. And I know everyone in our industry works so friggin' hard. Like, it's just, I'm still amazed that we've not learned from that one example and don't see more of this compared to, what I joked about earlier. I was like, hey, best friend, remember when we were 7? You're so going to die. Like, it's so obvious.
It's so obvious. It is. And I think that to bring up that example and build from it, you really need to finish Dragon Age Inquisition. And because it has a very tried and true character that you invest in, that basically also GTFOs. And I think that it's those, it's been a really long time, by the way. It's been 6 years since the game came out. So I won't say it because you haven't played it, but I will say that it's very easy to see who's the most loved and hated character of Dragon Age Inquisition's game. And it is because they learned from Eris's death. They learned from that staple of truly investing in a companion and then watching that companion leave. Whether it's death or it's voluntary, right?
No, I think showing that again, it's incredible. And I get, again, why it's so easy to miss this. Because sometimes these characters are, I may have made some jokes here, but that might not be the core of your game as well, right?
Yeah,
like,
but I mean, even if it isn't, let me bring up this example because something that one of my characters did in an RPG in one of the end cards for Inquisition was really exciting to me. And it was that she ended up losing her arm. And if you lose your arm as a character halfway through, and say you've put a ton of points into something like dual wielding, this was seen in Knights of the Old Republic Sith Lords. One of your characters only has one arm. So she can only wield one-handed weapons because, she's one hand. But imagine if that happened halfway through a franchise or halfway through the game. I would love to see a shooter even, right? A first-person shooter, a third-person game where you have this axe wielder who loses an arm, right? And now you put 50% of your skill points all in wielding two-handed, and suddenly your character loses an arm narratively. I think for myself, if I was going to just to hedge off the naysayers right now, I would somehow give you back a prosthetic, yes. However, I would really like to see it if you didn't, because that's the AAA developer coming out of me is, oh, you don't want to waste those points, right? But the ludonarrative harmonious person in me is like, no, like what would happen to you would truly feel that mechanical change, right? Just like you would in a companion, and it would be amazing to see a franchise that does something like that, where however they solve the problem that would come from that with you've wasted investment, in air quotes, how it would be easier or there's more bonus for you or something. It would be amazing to see something like that.
I completely agree with you on that. And then my second example is Ico, when at this time, companions were like the most hated things on the planet, and yet you needed, I've forgotten her name, begins with a Y. Is it Yora?
I think it was Yora. Yeah. Watch us both be
let's
wrong.
Say it is. Yeah, exactly. But you needed Yora to save the game, and to me, that was such a powerful moment because they had a role. Like they had something, not only purpose with the narrative, but they had like a power. And what I loved with that was also the use of music. The song is called Heal. So there's like very, very little music used throughout that game. And then when you get on there and you're both kind of sitting there sleeping and saving and then the music kicks in, like that to me was like...
No, it's even this, I love that. You're like, snap. Like it's it's that moment. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Massively. It's, Last Guardian had some flaws in terms of its AI, but still, one of the few games that made me cry at the end of that, and I was like, God damn it, right in the feels. So
no, it does,
again, the systems.
Oh, it's all back to the thing that we keep coming back to, which is the systems. And it's remembering, right, that systems aren't just about making something feel really great or functional in isolation, right? It's about how it's going to connect not just to the mechanics or to the actions the player is taking, but to the way those actions make the player feel and how those feelings of the game connect to the story and the world, right? It's all of that world experience because, you know, in Last Guardian, if the world didn't need the Guardian, like you wouldn't have the game. And that's when you know that it's done something right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, I'm trying to end this, but I'm still waffling on. What I love with the system is we talk about like one connecting with narrative and others connecting with other systems. Like the loading screen and the way to escape enemies is the same. And the fact they taught you through the loading screen blew my... I hope that you don't hear this because I'm about to use my B button. It's a new feature I've got, so I'm messing around with it. My mind, like it loved it. So yeah, it was great.
We have to have more like that. Like it's really those that are going to just make people go, wow, right?
Yes, for sure. Now I'm going to wrap it up this time, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming on this. I really enjoyed our chat.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I really need to get out more, so to speak, during these trying times and have more conversations.
Yeah, maybe not too far out.
Not too far out, just enough to be digital and have these discussions because I absolutely love talking about it. And so if anybody has any questions for me or anything that's come up, please, my DMs are open. And also you can just tweet at me. I can't say anything about anything I'm working on, of course, but I absolutely welcome all and any conversations.
Awesome. Do you want to give your Twitter handle? It will be in the description, but if you want to give it a shout out or any other places they can connect with you, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can connect with me on Twitter and on Instagram at the Lauryn Ash. And then you can also go ahead and just check out any of my new articles on my website. I do try to post monthly. And so that's something that I've been trying to do as well. So hopefully you can see that. I might want to re-record that, but...
Okay.
Yeah. So you can reach me on Twitter or on Instagram at the Lauryn Ash. I am on Twitter more often than Insta, so please check me there. Like I said, my DMs and my messages are open. And also, please check out my website every month for another game design article. I probably will be talking more about things like this with systems and ludonarrative harmony.
Fantastic. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do so on Twitter as well. It's just @MaxPairs. And if you want to email into the show with any questions, you can do so leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. So thank you all for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we have, and we'll catch you all next time.
See you then.